Welcome to the Indiana Football Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Indiana Football Weekly is brought to you by BetNow.eu. Go to BetNow.eu, use the promo code Truth50 and get a 50% cash back bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000. Or you can go through the GruelingTruth.com website, click on the banner at the top of the page, and use the promo code Truth50. I am your co-host for Indiana Football Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. Right now I'd like to welcome in our Indiana Hoosier beat reporter, Cole Hanna. How you doing, Cole?
Doing pretty good. Football season about to start back up. It's always a fun time, so I'm doing pretty well right now, Mike.
It's not always a fun time at Indiana University for football season, and I really
for the
had
first few weeks.
I had a hard time not saying Indiana Basketball Weekly and welcoming Steve and Colin too. So it's a little bit different from all of us. And let's look at this Indiana University football team. And I think that it is safe to say it is time for Tom Allen to kind of flip the script. Hoosiers have won all three non-conference games, been on the brink of bowl eligibility, needing to beat Purdue in the season finale to complete the deal. They have not been able to complete that deal. When you look at this Indiana team, is there anything different, good or bad, that you think coming into the 2019 season to give us a little bit more hope?
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things is they're going to have an experienced team back, which, it's good and bad, because you're bringing in those same guys that kind of failed to reach the 6 wins. But when you played a lot of young guys like they have the last few years, you're hoping those guys can take the next step, and you're expecting them to take the next step. I'll say this for IU, being optimistic about Indiana football has always kind of come back to bite you in the last few years. But I do think that this is a very talented football team relative to what Indiana has thrown out there in the past. I think the level of athlete they have has really gone up tremendously, whereas, 10 years ago they were recruiting against MAC teams for the level of athlete they had. Now they're going against some, Power 5 teams, some upper echelon Big Ten teams, and they're starting to win some of those recruiting battles. So you're starting to see those young guys come in, and you hope they can take the next step and get them over that hump. The other big thing they're going to have to look at here is the quarterback position. They're going to have a new quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., who I know if you watched him last year, you would have seen him get some reps in the Ball State, Penn State game, and he looked good, exciting young player, huge arm, mobile, kind of similar to Ramsey in that aspect, but he's got a cannon for an arm, can really make all the throws. The big question with him is going to be the accuracy. Can he be accurate with the throw? Can he make good reads? That's going to be the toughest part for him to transition. He's got all the talent in the world. I mean, he really is one of the best, I think, quarterback prospects that any has had. To unseat a starter like Peyton Ramsey that, he may not be a great quarterback, but he's steady. You know what he gives you. He gives you a solid level of play. And this is a kid coming off a torn ACL as a redshirt freshman. He beats out Peyton Ramsey. I think that should have people pretty excited that he can get back from that injury and get to that level of play to unseat Ramsey, who Tom Allen talked about. This is the returning starter. If someone's going to unseat him, they're going to have to beat him. Penix was able to do that, and I think that should have everyone excited.
Yeah, and in the backfield, the Hoosiers have a stable of runners. Steve Scott, who was a late addition 2018 recruiting class, rolled out 204 yards against Virginia, ended up gaining over 1,100 yards on the ground. Ronnie Walker Jr., who was a higher-ranked recruit. Also, you got Samson James, who's a freshman, a 4-star prospect from suburban Indianapolis, who decommitted from Ohio State. So when you look at the backfield, there's enough guys that can get it done there too.
Yeah, and Stevie Scott, you got to mention, he set the record, right, for true freshman rushing yards for Indiana, 1,000-plus yard runner last year. So, that's going to be another big weapon they have. They're bringing back an experienced offensive line as well, so that should help him. Samson James, the highest-rated recruit IU's ever gotten on campus. So that's going to be a big weapon. Ronnie Walker showed flashes last year. Like you said, Cole Guest, who was actually slated to be the starter last year, will be back. He suffered a season-ending injury last year, which gave Stevie Scott the role, to kind of step in as a starter and shine. But, yeah, they're a deep team at running back. And, honestly, I think that you can extend that to a lot of their skill positions. I think at wide receiver, they're an extremely deep team. DB, I think they're an extremely deep team. They've got a lot of talent in those areas that they really have never had, at least at this level. I think the big question with Indiana is going to be looking at the lines. They've always struggled going up against upper echelon Big Ten teams, especially along the line of scrimmage. that's going to have to change. They're going to want to get one of these program-changing victories.
Yeah, and they've got a couple returners from last year and a couple guys. Caleb Jones stood out in spring ball, I know, Matthew Bedford. What do they look like on the offensive line?
Yeah, so like I said, it's going to be an experienced unit. They've got a lot of, experienced players who've played 2-3 years as starters along the line of scrimmage. Caleb Jones, you mentioned, is one of the newcomers who really doesn't have that experience level. Physically, you like a lot of his physical traits. 6'8", almost 350, 360 pounds. He's, big guy there at the right tackle spot. He's going to be a big piece because when you put Penix in there, the right side's now going to be his blind spot. So Coy Cronk's been the guy that's been guarding that blind spot for the quarterback the last couple of years. He's going to be their best offensive lineman, someone you could look at with an NFL future. With Penix in there, a lefty, that's going to have to fall on Caleb Jones. He's a guy that doesn't have a lot of experience. You like the raw physical talent that he has, but he's got to be sure to be able to protect Penix. Everyone's obviously excited about Penix being that Ramsey, excited what he can give you, but you've got to keep him safe. You've got to keep guys off his back. So Caleb Jones is, I think, going to be a really, really key player along that offensive line, especially just with the decision to go with Penix. That's going to make his job all the more important.
Yeah, when you look at the Hoosiers on the defensive side of the ball, I think the last 3 years with Coach Tom Allen, they've really worked on improving their speed as well as athleticism on the front end of the defense. And defensive end, James Head, I think looks primed to emerge as an outside pass rusher. What do they look like up front?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, James Head is one of those exciting prospects who, Indiana beat out a couple big-name programs for him, good athlete along the defensive line. I think what they want here is to find someone that can get after the quarterback a little bit. That's something they've never really had pure pass rushers along the defensive line. I think James Head's a guy that can kind of, with the level of athlete he is, he has good size. I think that's someone that excites them. I think Madison Norris is another guy from Indianapolis. He'll be a redshirt freshman, but he's got good size, 6'5", almost 220, good athlete. Again, that's someone who I think they think can get after the quarterback a little bit. We have to talk about Juan Harris, who they are adding back to the team. He's kind of been on and off the team at different times, but he's a really, really big guy at D tackle, someone they hope can kind of step in there and just clog up the line of scrimmage, not really give opposing running backs a hole to run through. Again, similar to the offensive line, they're going to have some experienced guys here at D tackle. They didn't lose anyone too big. I think Alfred Bryant is another guy who I've heard at DN that, they really like what he's given them in practice. So it's going to be an interesting year. That's, in my estimation, one of the big question marks for Indiana. They've always struggled when it goes against, the Ohio States, the Michigan States, the Penn State. The difference between those two teams is always most profound along the offensive and defensive lines. So you have experienced groups here. You need those guys to start to take the next step, try to make up the difference there between what Indiana's throwing out there and what the top end of the Big Ten is throwing out there. That's going to be the big question mark, I think, for this team.
Yeah, and when you look at the backside of the defense, you've got 3 returners in the defensive backfield. You got Marcelino Ball, who's a rugged, inexperienced leader at the hybrid Husky position. And then they've got guys like Miller, McFadden, Jones, Allen. They're going to be able to rotate guys, keep them fresh there. But the defensive backfield, I think, looks strong, and the linebackers look deep.
Yeah, no, exactly. Again, the linebacker position, I think, is another area where you've got Raekwon Jones coming back, experienced guy, started for them pretty much every game last year. But next to him, they've got some, unproven players. Thomas Allen played a little bit last year. Micah McFadden played a little bit last year, played well. Those weren't every down guys, though. McFadden and Allen were both freshmen last year. They're going to step up, and they're going to be expected to take that next step and become quality Big Ten linebackers. I know McFadden, had a lot of fans last year just because he's a pretty special athlete. That linebacker position can move very well. Thomas Allen is a little bit more of a bigger guy, maybe not as mobile, but definitely more of a run-down guy. I saw they moved Kim Jones down from safety to linebacker, so that's going to be someone I think you'll be seeing get a lot of reps on linebacker. Good size. He's, I know he's played safety the last couple of years, but when you look at his size, 6'2", 6'3", 220, he's a big guy. He can move very, very well. I think he can play either the Husky position or linebacker, but it looks like with Marcelino Ball, who's really been one of their best defensive players the last few years. They're going to look to get him more reps at linebacker. But, again, I think DB is going to be a big position of strength here. We've mentioned Marcelino Ball. They've got two experienced corners, and Andre Brown and Ashawn Riggins. The safety position, they have a lot of talent there. Juwan Burgess got a lot of reps. He'll be back. Devon Matthews, I think, opened some eyes last year as a true freshman. Very, very good athlete, good size at 6'2". You're talking a 4'3", 40 guy. I think he's going to step into one of those starting safety positions with Jonathan Crawford leaving and trying to pursue his NFL dream. So they've got talent, a lot of talent in the secondary. Some young guys that, need to prove that the talent is there and that they can compete every day in the Big Ten. But definitely, I think, one of their most talented positions in the team.
All right, so let's look at this first game against Ball State. It's a fun in-state matchup. I keep wanting to call it the Hoosier Dome because I'm old, but at Lucas Oil Stadium. And yeah. IU won last year 38-10. Ball State won in 2011 and 12. The Hoosiers lead the series 6-3. When you look at this, Ball State is without the quarterback last year, quarterback Riley Neal, who left for Vanderbilt. They have options at quarterback and Drew Plight. And you've talked about the difference between IU and the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Penn States being up front. Now, I think this is something where you can say the same thing here, the difference between an Indiana, which is a mid to lower Big Ten team, against Ball State and the MAC, where Ball State returns 9 players. But I think this is all going to depend on defense. But this is all going to depend on whether Ball State can rush the passer or not.
Yeah, so it's going to be, I think, a very interesting test for Indiana because Ball State's an interesting team. They have a very strong offensive line. They did a great job of protecting Riley Neal last year. So that's going to be a test for Indiana early. How improved is that defensive line? Can they get after the quarterback? It's going to be a big test for them. On the flip side, the defensive line for Ball State was a bit of a weakness. So you want to see the Indiana offensive line kind of get off to a good start here, dominate, not just in passing situations, but creating holes for Stevie Scott, Samson James. Last season when Indiana played Ball State, they kind of ran all over him. That was one of Stevie Scott's big game to open up the season. They had a lot of success on the ground. Now, with, obviously their plethora of running backs, it's Michael Penix's first start as a, college quarterback. You're probably going to want to see them ease him in, rely on that running game a lot to get a lot of work done there. And Indiana's offensive line needs to be up to that task. I don't expect Ball State to necessarily have a lot of new talent in at D-line to fix that. From what I've seen, it's mostly going to be a similar team. There's not going to be a whole lot of change, at least in personnel. So the offensive line has to take advantage of that, dominate up front. Defensive line's going to have their hands full. It's going to be a good Ball State offensive line. But, when you're talking about a MAC opponent versus a Big Ten, you'd like to see talent went out there.
Yeah, and I would say this. If they have a hard time blocking Ball State, they're in for another 4-8, 5-7 season. They've got to be able to block Ball State, or they're never going to be able to block anybody in the Big Ten East. Any other keys you would want to look at here?
Yeah, I think the big thing is I would look at the Indiana secondary. I think, everyone's excited about the secondary, a lot of talent there. They're going to have their hands full, I think, with Ball State. I think you make an argument the receiving core for Ball State could be the best in the MAC. They have a lot of options there. They were one of the best passing teams in the MAC. They actually led them in passing yards per game last year. Now, I know Riley Neal's gone, but Plitz, he got some reps last year, looked decent. I know he threw, more interceptions than touchdowns, but the passing yards per game was relatively the same when Plitt was in there as it was with Neal. Ball State's going to look to move the ball through the air a lot. The secondary is going to be challenged early and often. I think they have the talent to not only win this matchup but dominate this matchup, but the Ball State receiving core is definitely not a slouch at all. Best in the MAC, I think, probably hands down. So that's going to be just a battle to watch there. I think the Indiana secondary, if we want this to be a position of strength, if, we want to prove that it's not just talent, that it can actually, translate to on-the-field results, and they need to dominate Ball State. They should not struggle with the Ball State receivers, even if by MAC standards it's a very good receiving core.
Yeah, and then after Ball State, you got Eastern Illinois, then Ohio State, which leads us to looking at the Eastern Division of the Big Ten today. I think there's no doubt the most talented team here is Ohio State. I think they're more talented than what they were last year. I think the question is, can Ryan Day step in and not miss a beat from what Urban Meyer was doing?
Yeah. Yeah, well, Ohio State's obviously going to be the team to beat, not just in the East, but in the entire Big Ten. They've been so dominant in the conference the last few years that someone's going to have to unseat them. I'm not sure anyone's going to do it again this year. Justin Fields is a little bit of an unproven guy for them at quarterback, but, very highly touted coming out of high school. Didn't play a whole lot of Georgia, so we'll see if that translates, onto the field here for Ohio State. But definitely the most talented team, top to bottom in the Big Ten. Penn State and Michigan, I think, are probably your second and third best teams in the Big Ten, also members of the Big Ten East. So, Indiana's going to have their hands full. They're in the East. They're always going to be playing a tough schedule. Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, all of those teams on their schedule. I look at anytime Indiana, just beating one of those four teams would be a huge, almost program-changing victory for Tom Allen. I think it would really signal that they're ready to get over that hump. But they just haven't been able to do it. They've played Michigan State tough the last few years, haven't been able to get out a win there. They've played Penn State extremely tough the last few years, haven't been able to get out of there with a win. Ohio State, they've even played tough recently, but they've just never been able to get that win. So this is the year I think really you want to see them try to get one of those teams, try to beat one of those big four in the East and get that signature win that Tom Allen's been looking for.
All right.
Now,
so,
the schedule
go
is
ahead. That's what I was going to the schedule. So.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
When you look at the schedule, Ball State, Eastern Illinois should be wins. Then you've got Ohio State, but you've got UConn. You should be 3-1 going to Michigan State. You beat Rutgers is 4. If you could beat Maryland at Maryland, you got 5. You beat Northwestern, you got 6, and you can go to a bowl game without having to beat Purdue.
Yeah, there you go. I think I'd rather beat Purdue, but we'll see what happens.
Go to bowl game because really, is Indiana Purdue even a rivalry anymore?
Well, certainly, Purdue's gotten the better of them the last couple of years, and you hate to say it, but Purdue really has been on fire in the recruiting trail. They're a team that's on the rise, while IU has just kind of sat at that 5-7 level. So, Purdue's a trendy pick, I think, actually, in the Big Ten West is kind of a dark horse maybe that can come in and challenge for the Big Ten West, partly because the West is so weak and there's not, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in the West. But it's also a testament to what Brom's been able to do at Purdue. And unfortunately, the two programs are kind of headed in different directions. IU is still searching for a bowl under Tom Allen, while you've got Purdue really rising pretty quickly under Jeff Brom. I think if Indiana wants to get back into the series and they want to, prove this is still a rivalry, that they can still dominate, that in-state rivalry there, they've got to, try to at least get a win this season. You want Purdue to at least have to worry about IU. The last few years, it almost seems like it's just the talent level, maybe 3, 4, or 5 years ago was Indiana. It was dominated by Indiana. Jeff Brom's come in there, and it's really changed extremely quickly, which is worrying, I think, for Indiana fans. You want them to go in. I know they have to go to Purdue, but I think with Penix, they have a chance to be a pretty special offensive team this year. They should be able to challenge Purdue. I think if we're talking about this as a rivalry where Purdue is just, out of Indiana's league, I think at that point we can call it not a rivalry anymore. I don't know if it's there yet, but it's definitely two programs trending in different directions.
Yeah, and my worry about the Ohio State game is week 2, while Indiana's playing Eastern Illinois, Ohio State's playing a really good Cincinnati team.
Yeah.
And that worries me because I think Ohio State, because you want to get Ohio State early with the new coach, I would think. So
definitely.
My worry here is Cincinnati goes in and actually upsets Ohio State, then they come to Indiana and they're pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a scary proposition, I think.
Or they get a wake-up call and the game's close and Ryan Day's pissed, and they're still pissed off. Because I think Cincinnati will play Ohio State tough. And I think that's going to have them more ready than what Indiana's going to get playing Ball State and Eastern Illinois.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. A scenario where Cincinnati upsets Ohio State is pretty much worst-case scenario for IU. If you look at actually Ohio State, for most of their recent history, they've had some games now where they've dropped a game early in the season, and you look back and you say, how did they lose that game? And what were they doing that week? So, if you want to get in Ohio State, I think getting them early is the best bet. Indiana gets them early, third game of the season, but if they drop a game to Cincinnati and come into Indiana pissed, I mean, the talent level is just not going to match up there. If Ohio State is jacked up, ready to play, ready to prove the Cincinnati game was a fluke, Indiana has no chance, even if they're playing at home. Now, if Ohio State takes care of business those first 2 weeks, come into Indiana feeling confident, IU can sneak up on them. I'm not going to say they're going to upset Ohio State, but they've played them tough the last few years. They've always given Ohio State a run for their money, at least through for the first half, first three quarters, and then towards the end of the game, Ohio State, starts to pull away. We'll see if they can keep that up this year. I think with Penix at quarterback, they'll have a much more dynamic offense. They can do a lot more offensively as far as play calls, opening up the field. Can that give them the juice they need to get over the hump in one of these games? We'll have to see, but it's definitely, something Tom Allen's hoping it can do.
Now, when you talk about getting over the hump with Indiana football, is getting over the hump just going 6-6 and making a bowl game, or 6-7, or is getting over the hump actually winning 8 games?
Yeah, I wouldn't say 6-6 is getting over the hump. I think for Indiana, if you want to get over the hump, you've got to start winning 7-8 games a year, right? And that's going to be tough to do in the Big Ten East. But it's something they've got to be able to do, I think, if they really want to get over the hump. Winning 6 games, to me, is not getting over the hump, right? We saw Kevin Wilson put together 6-win seasons, back-to-back 6-win seasons. And where did it get them? I mean, they didn't give them over the hump. They're still relatively the same team, caliber of team. 6 wins, it's a nice step, right? You don't – everyone wants a dream scenario where you just take that big step in 1 year and, boom, you're there. But it doesn't always play out that way. 6 wins – the unfortunate aspect of when you look at Indiana football, their history, Indiana's not in a position that you look at 6 wins and say that's not good enough, because that's proven to be such a tough metric for even them to reach. But I think it would be a nice first step. But if they really want to get over the hump, I think it's winning 7-8 games. Win a bowl game, for Christ's sake. I mean, how long has it been since they've won a bowl game? So I think that's something they need to do. 6 wins is, the target goal, get back to a bowl game. But if they really want to have a special season, a season you can look back on and say, yep, that's the year they got over that hump, I think it's got to win 7-8 games. You've got to beat a Penn State, beat a Michigan State, one of the upper echelon Big Ten teams. You've played them tough. You've never been able to finish it off. Yeah, I think they've got to do that this year.
With their schedule, the only way to do that is to beat a Michigan or Ohio State or a Penn State or a Michigan State. That's it.
Yeah.
Or Nebraska.
Yeah. So,
but Nebraska's at Nebraska, which is probably not going to be an easy get. So if you look at the home games, you got Ohio State and Michigan come in. Maybe you could get one of them.
Well, and on the Michigan game, I think something interesting, if you look at that schedule, they get Michigan at home. And they get Michigan at home sandwiched between the week before, Michigan is home to Michigan State, big in-state rivalry. Yeah. The week after, they're at Ohio State.
Yeah.
So you've got them in a pretty favorable position in terms of when you play them. They're at home. They've played Michigan tough. I'm not a hardball fan, so I'd love for Indiana to pull off that upset against Harbaugh. But, they've got the talent to keep it close. They've done that the last few years. It's just getting over that hump, putting together a full 4 quarters. I think one of the big things that's hurt IU the past few years against these teams is they've really been playing with a handicapped offense, especially against Penn State, Michigan. They were not respecting Indiana's deep passing game at all. And I think it's partly play calling, and I think it's partly the limitations of Peyton Ramsey at quarterback. You hope if you put Mike Penix in there, who has a cannon for an arm, can make every throw, does that force them to open up? Does that open up things for the offense that you can start to put some more points on the board and maybe pull off that upset?
All right. So what's your prediction? How many games does Indiana win this year?
I think it'll be very. I could see 5-7. I could see 7-5. I'll be optimistic. I think if Mike Penix is as advertised, a big arm guy, athletic, can make all the throws, I'll say they get over the hump. They'll win 7 games. I think they can pull off an upset against Michigan this year. I'll say they beat. Let's go Ball State, Eastern Illinois, UConn, Rutgers, Maryland, Northwestern, and Michigan. I'll say they'll get to 7 wins.
All right. I'll say they get to 6 and they don't beat Michigan, just because I'm going to play it as safe as you possibly can as an Indiana. But
that's a good thing to do with Indiana football.
What about an Indiana Ball State score?
Yeah, I think. Well, obviously, when you look at what they did last year, Indiana dominated. But Ball State played a good Notre Dame team tough last year. You never know week to week, but I think Indiana should dominate this game. I'll go 38-14 IU.
Damn, I was going to say 38-17 IU, so we'll be close one way or the other.
Close, yeah.
All right, guys, I want to remind you, you can hear Indiana Football Weekly. Are we going to do this Saturday after the game, or you just want to do it every Wednesday?
I'm fine either way. I can do whichever one I think works best for you. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, well, we'll just do every Wednesday at this same time, unless we change it. As you can tell, we're really prepared here at the Grueling Truth Sports Network to do an Indiana football show, where we texted each other yesterday and decided to do it. All right, guys. I want to thank Cole for coming on. I want to remind everybody at 9 o'clock tonight, you can hear me with CFL legend Robert Drummond on the CFL Weekly Pick'em Show. Make sure you go to gruelingtruth.com and check out all Cole Hanna's articles. Cole, you going to have a preview article for this game for us?
Yeah, I'll get that to you tomorrow night. Look for that to be posted sometime, tomorrow, for whenever you guys get it up.
Tomorrow or Friday. All right, so keep a lookout for Cole Hanna's articles on thegruelingtruth.com, and make sure you go to betnow.eu. Use the promo code Truth50 or go through the gruelingtruth.com website. Use the promo code Truth50 to get a 50% cashback bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to remind you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Google Play. Anywhere you find sports podcasts or podcasts of any kind, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Cole Hanna, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.